Hello again, whiskey friends. Thanks for joining me, everybody, for another Tuesday discussion. Here on Tuesdays, we do like to make videos to address questions that we're getting either in the YouTube comments, Instagram, or from our amazing patrons. And today's question is going to get me in a whole lot of trouble, but somebody asked it and we're going to answer it anyway. But somebody asked me after my top 20 video, well, Jeff, how much money did you spend on whiskey in 2023? A, you should never ask somebody that question. And B, I'm going to answer it anyway and get myself into some trouble. So thank you for joining me today, whiskey friends. Let's kick off the show. All right. Well, one thing I do like to do when we have these Tuesday discussion videos is have a pour with everybody. Helps loosen me up as I'm doing all this jibber jabbering. And today I decided for a Russell's Reserve. This is actually a pick that Kelsey helped with, thus the Metallica theme here on the sticker. But help pick this turkey, this Russell's pick, with the Mash and Journey Whiskey Club. So cheers to Kelsey, to Jason, and to Scott. All right, get a little sip of this. Because I need some liquid encouragement before we get into this topic here. But let's just run through it. Let's just run through the whole year. Now, when somebody asked me this question, I was like, I don't think I have good documentation of that. So I can just skirt by that question and just approximate. And then I realized that Kelsey Durrell and I have been filling out our review form all year long since January 2023. And one of the questions that's in there is, how much did this bottle cost? And the other question that's in there is, when was this bottle released? And then I realized, oh no, I have the data. I can put this together and I can summarize it with some caveats, of course. So my accounting is probably a tad understated, but this is as much as I'm going to be willing to admit on camera. Let's put it that way. So let's pull up some of the summaries here as we go through this. But how much whiskey did I purchase in 2023? If you've seen the videos recently, as we go through the reviews and as we go through the top 20, I'll be kind of keeping track of, hey, this is ranked here on the year and here all time. So for the most part, if you just go through the channel and all the videos, I mean, you know what we buy and you know when we bought it. I mean, it all kind of is out there in the open. But ultimately, as of recording, there were 68 bottles that were recorded in the database that were purchased and reviewed by me. And then I thought it was interesting too. 47 of them were bourbons, 18 were ryes, the rest were single malts. So I thought that was an interesting split as well. But ultimately, we were talking about the 68 bottles that I purchased over the course of 2023. Now, breaking this down, we can break this down in two halves to make this all more palatable. So when we go through all of that, you will see how the numbers all stacked up and the amount of bottles that were in there. And it's interesting too, because there are some choke points when more months were way more expensive than others. But ultimately, to count for this, it had to be labeled as a 2023 release. There were some maybe generic releases that I wasn't able to label as 2023. For an example, I purchased a Knob Creek 9-year. I purchased a Russell's 10-year, kind of the bottom shelfers when I did that challenge at the beginning of the year. Hard to do all the accounting on that because they weren't age stated and it gets all wrapped up into the mix of things that I might have owned before. So I tried to keep it to things that were released and reviewed in 2023. What does make it awkward is, hey, some of these were gifts, but at the same time, some of the things that I bought were gifts given. So kind of equals out in the wash. And the other thing that's not accounted for is backup bottles. But quite frankly, I didn't buy two of many bottles, if at all, that didn't end up as gifts. I'm actually looking at my closet here, trying to think if I even could bring one that was a prominent backup bottle. I did buy a backup bottle of the ECBP C923, but then I just opened that on a recent live. So that's not even a backup bottle anymore. So let's break this down first at the first half of the year and then into the second half of the year. And hopefully, no one shares this with my wife as we go through the logistics of this. But what's interesting here is when we start at the first half of the year, we're talking about 22 bottles for a total of $2,300. As we go through this, you can see the dollar amounts there: 200, 300, 100, 400, 700, 475. And I've actually got a list here. I printed out just some of the bottles there so I could kind of walk us through the year as we go through it. But January, one of the big bottles that was there was the Magi Rye, which did make it into my top 20. I raved about that one all year, and that carried through 12 months, which is pretty impressive. Getting into February, we get into the Elijah Craig Barrel Proof A123. Some other notable bottles as we get into April, the Four Gates. Anytime the Four Gates drop, that is, of course, going to cause a tick up in the amount that I spend because each of those are typically $200. And if we go to June then, so the last month there, that 475, I actually felt that was pretty good value when I saw the bottles that were in here. We had a Weller Foolproof, the Silver Grove from New Riff that ultimately made my top 20, Old Forester 117 series, the Evan Williams 1783 Hero Edition that I liked a lot, and then there was an Old Route 8. So that's kind of the summation of a lot of those bottles that came in June. I think I actually named all of them in June because I thought that was an interesting story. Now, what typically happens though is that years in this hobby are backloaded. They're backloaded in terms of the limited editions, the special releases, the silly season that occurs at the end of September and carries through December. So, not too surprised when I look at this that it's only 2,300 the first half of the year. But of course, then this is going to escalate very, very quickly towards the back half of the year. As I said, there were 68 bottles in here, and I've only accounted for 22 of them in the first half. So then when it gets to the second half here, I guess this is where I get myself in trouble. The second half does escalate, particularly starting in July. What happens in July? Well, there's some Four Gates and there's some K-Lukes. There's just some high-priced bottles, and they just kept coming. There's a whole bunch of notable single barrels as well, including the Copper and Cask that Darrell helped pick with Yankee. So, yeah, that was an expensive month. That's one of those things where week to week, I probably didn't even know how much I was going to spend until I got to the end of the month and then realized how much I spent. In August, things tapered down a little bit, though some notable bottles here because August was the month I went to a lot of bottle shares and got a Still Austin cast strength, the Essence from the Bourbon Junkies. So I got their releases of their ryes and their bourbons, and then the Old Line that I had been shouting about all year long as well. But at least I got a reprieve a little bit of July. That reprieve didn't last too long because we go straight into September, which ended up being the most expensive month of the year on paper. Oh, man. Corbin Cask. Okay, so the one that really elevates it's the Wild Turkey Voyage at 275. The Remus Repeal sticks out. A Copper and King's Bourbon. That one's actually pretty budget, but I just wanted to call that one out anyway. ECBP C923. The costs in September, though, I highlighted a few of them, but there were quite a few things that were bought in September. And then that set in course, a lot of the reviews happening in October and November. October and November, things did slow down. Thank God. And then going into October too. October, I guess, slowed down, but it was still relatively expensive. We went on a bourbon trail trip there. So a lot of that was front loaded to the beginning of October when it comes to that $800. Yeah, November, obviously what I did the last 2 months had to slow down. So thankfully I did. The most notable things that I bought in November was New Riff came out with their special releases. And then we got December, When things escalated again, they mainly escalated because I drove to Hard Truth, 2 hours away. So we're not counting gas money. We're also not counting shipping and tax on any of this, but boy. But I went to Hard Truth and bought the Finish series for myself and a whole bunch of people. And then they also had a single barrel and they had a harvest rye, and I had some fun at Hard Truth. So I know the reasons why the months that escalate do escalate, but it's interesting to see it laid out on paper. I don't know if I'm supposed to be proud of myself on those months that only came in at 200 or 300, or if that's still extreme. You let me know, but you can see how this all played out. We'll talk about this in recap in just a second here. But when it's all said and done, what did I spend in 2023? Approximately around $7,200 on whiskey out of the $68. Now you got to keep in mind, how much of it are we doing for the channel versus how much are we doing for it if it was the natural course of things? Honestly, I don't think my habits have changed all that much from 2022 or 2021 or 2020. For the most part, I'm just doing the same things that I always did, just doing it now for you and doing it for the channel. So that's where we ended the year, was around $7,200. That essentially equates to around $600 each month. And I'll be frank with you, I can't keep that pace up anymore. So when we do the resolutions for 2023 video, spending less on whiskey is going to be one of those. That pace is fun, but unsustainable and gets in the way of other things. So that opens the books there on the amount spent in 2023. I do have to chime in again. That doesn't count shipping. That doesn't count tax. So we, just kind of conveniently roll over those two additional costs when we talk about those things. But let's not do the math any deeper because I'm already probably in deep water. But it's not too hard to see what we're spending on whiskey at any point in time if you just watch even the videos that we're doing. If we're doing a review and we don't call out that it's a sample, we bought that bottle. If we're doing something sample related, then you know that we didn't buy that bottle. So you can pretty much track what we spend month to month. And ideally, we are getting some type of review out of it if we're going to be investing in a bottle, though some bottles we do buy just for ourselves. Thus, there are 68 bottles that were reviewed in 2023, but not all of those got their own video. So a lot of them are probably single barrel MGPs for me. But that opens up the books. Oh, be kind in the comments. I have no idea what to expect from this particular one, but the question was asked. I had the data, and I'm just willing to put it out there. So now you know how much I spent in 2023. If you're willing to let me know if you spent more or less, I would appreciate it. Hopefully you're on the lesser side, but I would say I do enjoy this hobby, and I'm going at this with no regrets. So thank you for joining me today for today's discussion. If you have a question that you'd like to embarrass me with later, just let me know in the comments. We'll do it in this form. And until next time, I'll catch you on the next whiskey discussion. Goodbye, everybody.
Jeff, just be friends with me. But you have these whiskey friends, and you say hello again. Oh, Jeffrey, you should just be friends with me. But you have these whiskey friends, and you say hello again. Oh, Jeffrey, you should just be friends with me. But you have these whiskey friends, and you say